بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله صلى الله وسلم على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اهتدى بهداه. أما بعد. Last week in the book of Tahara, we got to the book of, or the chapter of Ghusl, and we spoke about Ghusl and some of the things that require Ghusl. And one of the things that we did mention in the Hadith, and it's mentioned in the Quran, and that is the ghusl is wajib for the menstruating woman or the nufasa, the woman who's had a baby, and then the blood that comes out with that baby, such a woman is called nufasa. Okay, that's nifas. Once that's finished, that period is over, this woman who's got nifas is treated exactly like the menstruating woman. So nifas, I think postpartum bleeding is called. This woman has a child and bleeds. This blood that comes alongside the child just before, sometimes just before giving birth or just after giving birth, if she bleeds, then she's considered nufasa, just like the menstruating woman, meaning she doesn't pray and she doesn't fast and she doesn't have to repeat her prayers, but she has to repeat her fasts. All the rulings of the menstruating woman apply to her. Once this period of bleeding is finished, she has to make ghusl. Once it's finished, she has to make ghusl. Similarly with the menstruating woman, once the period of menstruation is finished, she has to make ghusl. Okay? So once the cycle is finished, ghusl becomes wajib. And intercourse is haram until the ghusl is made. Intercourse doesn't become permissible once she finishes her period. Now if she finishes her period, some rulings apply. For example, she has to pray now. Once her cycle is finished, she needs to pray again. Even if she hasn't made ghusl yet, her salah is, the time for that salah is wajib. Similarly, she has to fast even before making ghusl. Let's say her menstrual cycle finishes 1 minute before Fajr, before the adhan of Fajr. 1 minute before it, her menstrual cycle is finished. Does she have to fast that day? Yes, she needs to fast that day. Her cycle is finished, she has a wife, she hasn't made ghusl yet. Still, she needs to fast, because ghusl is not a condition for the fast. As for intercourse, it's not allowed until ghusl is made. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you concerning the menstruation, as Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah. قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى. Say it is a harmful thing, it is a harm. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. So keep away from the women whilst on their cycles. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ. Until they become pure. Okay, that's the first, pure. They become pure, the cycle is finished. فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ. Then when they purify themselves, then you can go on to them as Allah has permitted, or as Allah has commanded. Meaning, intercourse becomes allowed after they purify themselves. So ghusl is wajib there. Ghusl is wajib with mani coming from the private intentions. That can be from a wet dream or whatever else. Whether it's halal or haram. When we're talking about the obligation of ghusl, we're not talking about something is allowed. So when the scholars here mention, for example, ghusl is wajib due to masturbating, doesn't mean that masturbating is allowed. When they say entering a woman who is not your wife and haram relationships requires ghusl, doesn't mean that that's allowed. Okay? Entering a woman while she's on her period is haram, without doubt. Does it require ghusl? Yes, it requires ghusl from you. Just because it's not haram, just because it's haram does not mean that ghusl doesn't apply. Okay, what they're concerned here about is ghusl. We also said intercourse requires ghusl, whether a person ejaculates or not. Then we got to the hadith of Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu. أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال غسل الجمعة واجب على كل محتلم. أخرجه السبعة. Reported by the seven. Who are the seven? Al-Bukhari and Muslim, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Okay, these are the seven. Okay, and if he says the six, all of those except Ahmad. All of those except Ahmad. And if he says the five, all of those except Bukhari and Muslim. Okay. Ghusl al-Jum'ah, the Friday ghusl is wajib for every muhtalim, every person who's reached the age of puberty. Okay, every person who's reached muhtalim ihtilam is a wet dream. Okay, but the point isn't here that a person has a wet dream, because a person can reach the age of puberty via another method. Okay, and they cannot have had a wet dream. Okay, so ghusl al-Jum'ah wajib. The Prophet ﷺ says wajib. The four Imams agree that the Friday ghusl is not wajib. The four Imams, rahmatullahi alayhi, Ahmad and Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shaikh, agree that the Friday ghusl is not wajib. Okay. Now, of course, those who say it's wajib use this hadith as their proof. They say the Prophet ﷺ says the Friday ghusl is wajib. What more do you want than that? The Prophet ﷺ says it's wajib. And this hadith is as authentic as it gets. It's in Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by all six Imams. So they say, Ghusl al-Jum'ati wajib ala kulli muhtalim. It means it's wajib. That's the madhab of Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, rahimahullah. The majority of scholars say wajib here does not mean the wajib that we know. Because at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the language of the scholars of fiqh are two different things. They're two different things. What the scholars mean when they say wajib is one thing, and what the companions or the time of the Prophet ﷺ, what they meant by wajib might be another thing. Doesn't mean definitely is another thing. It might be another thing. And this is why Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah, when he was asked about this hadith, غسل الجمعة واجب على كل محتلم, he said, ليس كل ما في الحديث واجب فهو واجب. Not everything that's wajib in the hadith is wajib. And Malik is from the Imams of hadith and the Imams of fiqh. He says not everything that says wajib in the hadith is wajib. It's wajib in terms of fiqh. Okay. And this is why Ata ibn Abi Rabah, rahimahullah wa radiya anhu, goes from the fuqaha of Mecca. He was a big imam in Mecca. And at the time of Hajj, it would be announced, لا يفتي في الحج إلا عطاء. No one gives fatwa regarding Hajj except Ata. He was a big imam, rahimahullah wa radiya anhu. When he was asked about the Friday ghusl, he said, هو واجب لا يأثم على تركه. It's wajib, but there's no sin upon leaving it. How can it be wajib and there's no sin upon leaving it? How can it be wajib but there's no sin upon leaving it? Yeah, by wajib he means he wanted to stick to the wording of the hadith. That's why he said wajib. It's wajib. But there's no sin in leaving it. Okay, there's no sin in leaving it. And then Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was delivering the khutbah, and Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu walked in. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, what time do you call this? Whilst Umar was giving the khutbah, Uthman came in. He said, what time do you call this? He said, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I did nothing more than as soon as I heard the adhan, I made wudu and I came. So he said, and wudu? And you only made wudu? No, you didn't even make ghusl today? And that's it. Now, this was in front of who? All the companions. And it's Umar, and Uthman, two of the khulafa. Okay? And Umar did not say to him, go back and make ghusl. If it was wajib, he would have had to say, go back and make ghusl. You can't pray without ghusl. If it was wajib, Uthman radiallahu anhu would have made ghusl himself. He wouldn't have needed to come then be told. How can the Khalifa of the Muslims not know something as basic as this? Ghusl is mustahab or wajib. He would have to know the ruling. He would have to know the ruling. And this was a repeated thing. It's not a one-off incident, one-off ruling which doesn't happen much, which not everyone might know. No, it's a repeated thing. Imagine the companions radiallahu anhu didn't know whether al-Fatiha is wajib or not. How is that possible? Because it's a daily thing. Okay, same with this. And what settles the dispute really, out of respect, one shouldn't say it settles the dispute, but the following hadith, hadith of Ali radiallahu, hadith of Samurah ibn Jundub radiallahu anhu, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من توضأ يوم الجمعة فبها ونعمت ومن اغتسل فالغسل أفضل. رواه الخمسة, narrated by the five. وحسنه الترمذي, and the Tirmidhi rahimahullah says this is a hasan hadith, so it's authentic, it's a good hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever makes wudu on the day of Jumu'ah, فَبِهَا وَنِعْمَتْ, you've done a good thing. And whoever makes ghusl, then ghusl is better for you. Ghusl is better. Okay, so this is clear that ghusl is better, not necessarily wajib. So a person is not sinful for leaving out ghusl, because these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. And the words of the Prophet ﷺ can't contradict each other. They have to be put together and reconciled. And the only way to reconcile this is to say that wajib means extra recommended. Yeah? Extra recommended. And this is why when the scholars of tajweed say al-madd al-muttasil wajibun. Okay, for example, al-madd muttasil, reciting a madd, extending the letter whilst reciting Quran is wajib. Do they mean if you don't do it you're sinful? They don't mean you're sinful if you don't do it. They mean it's obligatory for the reciter. If you're reciting, if you want to recite correctly, you have to do it. Al-maddul lazim. Okay, the mad of, for example, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. That mad is wajib. When the scholars of tajweed say it's wajib, if someone recited غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, is that haram? No. It's makruh, disliked, but it's not haram. Okay, because they haven't changed the meaning of the Quran. But the scholars of tajweed say it's wajib. They say it's wajib. They agree that this is wajib. It's a mad that's lazim. So that means that not everything that's referred to as wajib means what the scholars of fiqh mean to be wajib. Okay, and this is to be understood. And Malik rahimahullah explained that. Not everything that's wajib in the hadith is wajib for the fuqaha, for the faqih. Okay. So that's clear. The Friday ghusl is a sunnah every Friday. It's recommended, and its time begins after Fajr and ends before Jumu'ah. Okay, ends before Jumu'ah. After Salat al-Jumu'ah, you've missed the sunnah. You've missed the sunnah. Yeah, if the Salah has been prayed and you want to make ghusl at Asr time, for example, that's a shower. It's not a ghusl. Okay, that's a shower, but you're not rewarded for the Friday ghusl. Yeah, the Friday ghusl has to be before Jumu'ah. And it can be any time from Fajr until Jumu'ah. And the closer it is to Jumu'ah, the better. The closer to Jumu'ah, the better. Because the aim of it is to be clean, ready for Jumu'ah. And in fact, according to Malik, you have to do it just before Jumu'ah. Why? Because he says the aim is to go to Jumu'ah, washed and clean. Most scholars say from Fajr to Jumu'ah. Okay, is that clear? So ghusl Jumu'ah is mustahab, it's a sunnah. And the same ghusl that you would do for major impurity, you would do it the same way. Okay, wudu, or before cleaning the private parts and making wudu, and then full ghusl, washing the hair, and so on and so on. Okay. Yes?
What about if you say, for example, you do ghusl after Fajr, you leave for work and stuff, and you have the intention to do it before that sunnah, but then later on you have to do wudu again.
Yeah.
Do you still get rewarded for that?
Yes. That's fine.
So that counts as
it counts as Friday ghusl. Even if a person makes a ghusl after Fajr, even though, like we said, the best is to do it closer to Jumu'ah as possible. But let's say someone's going to go to work, and there's no way you can do it before Jumu'ah. You have to do it in the morning before you leave for work. You do it after Fajr, and that's your reward for the Friday ghusl. After that, you go to the bathroom and use the toilet, and you lose your wudu, and you have to repeat your wudu, no problem. Not a problem. Okay, but the main thing is after Fajr and before Jumu'ah. Okay. Let's say a person has two reasons to make ghusl. So they're in a major state of impurity, they're in janaba, so they have to make ghusl. and at the same time it's Friday, it happens to be Friday. And in fact, the fuqaha recommend that a person has intercourse on the Friday morning. This is recommended because the Prophet ﷺ says, "Man ghassala waghtasala," whoever makes ghusl and makes another person require ghusl. So they say what that means is you make your wife require ghusl. In other words, intercourse. And so a person makes ghusl for that and for Jum'ah. One ghusl suffices for both. A person doesn't have to repeat ghusl janaba, okay, now you're pure, and then you repeat ghusl of Friday. There's no need for that necessarily. However, a person makes one ghusl and both of them suffice. Yeah, that's the mashhur of the madhab of Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. One ghusl is enough. One ghusl and it goes underneath both. Just like if a person goes to the bathroom and wants to go to sleep, and at the same time wants to pray Isha. Does that wudu, is that sufficient for Isha and for going to sleep? Yes. Yeah? Because it's a sunnah to make wudu before going to sleep. Okay? It's a sunnah to sleep upon wudu. So this person says, this is my wudu for Isha, which is wajib, and my wudu for before I go to sleep, which is a sunnah. So both of them are included. You don't need to make wudu twice. Yeah? And so, hopefully this mas'ala is clear. But ghusl doesn't need to be done twice if a person is in janabah. وعن علي رضي الله عنه قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقرئنا القرآن ما لم يكن جنبا رواه أحمد والخمسة وحسنه الترمذي وصححه ابن حبان. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says here, or Ali رضي الله عنه says, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم used to teach us the Quran except when he was junub. Junub means what?
State of impurity.
Major state of impurity, not just state of impurity. Major state of impurity. Okay? So that's what junub is. So he said he used to teach us Quran except in that state. Which means that the junub cannot recite Quran. Someone who is junub cannot recite the Quran. And as far as I know, this is a matter of ijma'. The scholars agree on this issue, that the junub can't recite Quran. Now, this means that if a person goes to sleep at night after having intercourse, or wakes up in the morning, has a wet dream or whatever else, they can't recite the Quran without making ghusl. The only exception is what? It's the only exception when you're junub, major state of impurity, and you still can recite Quran. We're talking about junub, major state of sexual impurity. We'll come to the menstruating woman later. Okay, no water, they make tayammum. We're talking about someone who doesn't make tayammum and has water. The only exception is when you don't intend reciting the Quran. So, let's say you want to make dua, and you're lying in your bed, and you say, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That's a verse of the Quran. But you meant a dua, you intended dua. You didn't mean to recite Quran. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنًا وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Did you intend to recite Quran? No, even though this is a verse of the Quran, you didn't intend recitation. So that's allowed. There's no problem in that. Or you're about to go to sleep, and you don't want to make ghusl for whatever reason. You're too tired or whatever else. So you want to recite the adhkar before you go to sleep. So you recite Ayat al-Kursi, and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. You recite all these surah, maybe even Surah Al-Mulk, 2 pages and a half, and all of that would be fine. All of that would be fine. Why? Because Surah Al-Mulk, I'll need to double check what the majority opinion on Surah Al-Mulk is. But some scholars allow Surah Al-Mulk even. Why? Because they say you're not intending recitation. You're intending dhikr. Dhikr before going to sleep. These are your adhkar before going to sleep. Yeah? For example, reciting Ayat al-Kursi. You don't mean to recite Ayat al-Kursi because of the reward of reciting Quran. You're not intending a reward of reciting Quran. You're intending it as a type of ruqyah, protection before going to sleep. Okay? And so that would be fine, even for the junub, even for the menstruating woman. There's no issue there. Okay? And according to the mashhur, according to Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, what's not allowed is reciting a whole verse. Reciting a whole verse. So the person recites half a verse, that's fine. Reciting half a verse is okay. Or reciting part of a verse, because of whatever, they need to correct a person. Let's say a person makes a mistake while reciting, and you want to correct them just on that part, you can correct them on that. Even though you mean recitation, you can still correct them on that, and there's no issue. Okay. So long as a person doesn't play with the rulings of Sharia. Because one person will say, okay, in this case, we'll recite half of verse number 1, then half of verse number 2. Then go back and recite half of the second verse, the second half of the first verse, and the second half of the second verse. Then back to half, and half, and half. If a person was to do that, then that would be haram. Okay. Otherwise, small cases, a person recites a few words from a verse, part of a verse for whatever reason, then there's no harm. Is that ruling understood? Yeah. So Ghusl Jumu'ah and the recitation of the one who's junub. وعن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه. That hasn't been changed, has it? 7:42. عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أتى أحدكم أهله ثم أراد أن يعود فليتوضأ بينهما وضوءا أخرجه مسلم. If one of you has intercourse with their wives, these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. One of you has intercourse with their wives, then wants to return again after that, is that allowed? It's allowed. Why would that be haram? It's allowed, but the Prophet ﷺ commands and says, فَلْيَتَوَضَّأْ بَيْنَهُمَا وُضُوءًا. Let him make a wudu between them. Let him make a wudu between them. And in another narration that Al-Hakim has, he says, فَإِنَّهُ أَنْشَطُ لِلْعَوْدِ. Because it is more active. It's more active for a person. After intercourse or after janaba, there's a lack of energy. Then after ghusl, energy returns again. Even wudu, generally. Even if a person wakes up from sleep, just from sleep, and a person has ghusl, has a shower, or makes wudu, that livens you up a lot more. And this is why a person might wake up early in the morning, very tired, just about able to open their eyes. As soon as they make wudu, they're lively again. And afterwards they can't go back to sleep, because they're already lively. And so the same here. If a person wants to repeat intercourse, then the sunnah is to have a ghusl a wudu in between. A wudu in between. And a ghusl is better. Ghusl is better. Okay. وللأربعة عن عائشة رضي الله. This hadith is Sahih Muslim, by the way, if I haven't mentioned it already. وللأربعة عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ينام وهو جنب من غير أن يمس ماء وهو معلول. Let me check what the ruling of Shaikh al-Albani on this hadith is. So the Prophet ﷺ says in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ used to sleep in a state of major sexual impurity. He would go to sleep in that state without touching water, meaning without making wudu or without making ghusl. Okay, is that allowed? Yes, it's allowed. The author says وَهُوَ مَعْلُومٌ, it's defective. Ibn Hajar says وَهُوَ مَعْلُول. Yeah. Okay. He says here it's authentic. No, he says it's weak. Okay, it's not an authentic hadith. But the meaning is right. Okay? The meaning is still correct. Even though, and we learned this, we said this, repeated this several times. Just because a hadith is not authentic, it doesn't mean that the ruling doesn't apply. In fact, the scholars agree that it's allowed. And Umar radiallahu anhu. However, it's recommended to make wudu before going to sleep. A person has intercourse and wants to go to sleep. Yes, a person will be tired and they can't bother to stand up and make wudu or ghusl and so on. But the sunnah is to make wudu. Strongly recommended to make wudu at least. This is why Umar radiallahu anhu asked the Prophet ﷺ, can one of us go to sleep junub? He said, Na'am, idha tawadda. He said, yes, if you make wudu. Okay? Yes, if he makes wudu. However, the making wudu is recommended, not wajib. Okay? So making wudu before going to sleep is recommended. Okay, we'll end with this hadith. وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا اغتسل من الجنابة يبدأ فيغسل يديه. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, Aisha narrates, says, when the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم used to make ghusl from janaba, he would begin by washing his hands. ثم يفرغ بيمينه على شماله فيغسل فرجه. Then he would pour water. يفرغ بيمينه على شماله, pour water over from his right over his left and wash his private parts. So the first step is to wash the hands, then to wash the private parts. Then she says رضي الله عنها ثم يتوضأ, then he makes wudu, full wudu. ثم يأخذ الماء فيدخل أصابعه في أصول الشعر. Then he takes water and enters his fingers into the roots of his hair. In wudu, we said washing the hair is makruh, disliked in wudu. But in ghusl it's wajib. In ghusl you have to wash the hair. The roots of the hair need to be washed. Even if you have long hair, you need to wash the roots of the hair. Yeah, the scalp, the head has to be fully washed. ثم حفن على رأسه ثلاث حفنات. Then he takes some water and he pours 3 handfuls of water on his head. ثم أفاض على سائر جسده ثم غسل رجليه. Then he pours water over the rest of his body. Then he washes his feet again. So here we have washing the feet twice. Why wash the feet twice? We have the first step is washing the hands, then washing the private parts, then making wudu, then washing the hair, then pouring water over the body 3 times, then washing the rest of the body, okay, properly, preferably from the right and then the left. Then she says he washes his feet again. Why?
Because some impurity might have come from the body.
Impurity come from the body, possibly, but specifically the feet. Why specifically?
Sometimes the water is dumped on the floor.
Is unclean.
Unclean.
Okay, maybe the water is not clean, but that's a possibility.
No, on
the ground. This is what it is. Okay, this is what it is. The ground. Because then, it wasn't like what we have now in baths and showers and the surface is clean and the surface is... No, they would be on sand or whatever else. And so he'd have to step away from that place and then wash the feet again. Step away from that. Otherwise, the other narration doesn't mention washing the feet twice. It just says washing the feet. Washing the feet once. And that's all that's needed in our time, where we're not going to have this problem of needing to move away and to wash the feet again in case this or in case that. You just make wudu and then you wash the whole body. That's the complete ghusl. Person says Bismillah, washes the hands, washes the privates, makes wudu, complete wudu, then washes the hair, and then pours water over the body, the right side, then the left side, and that's your ghusl complete. This is all with the wajib and the sunnah included. What about the obligatory ghusl? What's the bare minimum? تعميم الجسد بالماء. Okay, pouring water all over the body and that's it. Without any ghusl, without any wudu, without any order, without right to left, without saying Bismillah, without necessarily paying extra attention to the hair, without, like we said, washing the feet at the end and so on. If a person has touched water on every part of the body, that's your ghusl complete. Complete. Okay, ghusl is complete like that. And you can go and pray with that and touch the mishaf and do whatever you want to do. So long as you intend that to be including your major state of impurity and your minor state of impurity. Because now, without making the wudu, you've lifted your major state of impurity. Okay, but you intend also to pray with this ghusl. Yeah, so let's say a person dives into the sea with the intention of ghusl. The intention of ghusl so that they can pray. They dive into the sea, come out, straight away pray. Is that possible? Yeah, that's fine. They've done what they need to do. The body's been washed completely. Okay, and they've done the bare minimum, the wajib. This whole narration is about what's recommended and what's better. Yeah. ولهما من حديث ميمونة, this is part of the same hadith. ثم أفرغ على فرجه وغسله بشماله ثم ضرب بها الأرض. He washed his private parts, then struck his hands against the earth. He had to clean his hands against the earth. That's why he struck them against the earth. And now if we have soap and whatever else to wash the hands after that, that suffices. وفي رواية فمسحها بالتراب ثم أتيته بالمنديل فرده. And in another narration, then I brought him a towel, but he returned it. He rejected it, he didn't want it. And began wiping off the water with his hand. Began wiping water off with his hand. This is why the Hanabila and the Shafi'iyya say the sunnah is to not wipe with the towel. The sunnah is to do that with your hand. It's better to not wipe with the towel, according to Ahmad and the Shafi'i. Shaykh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen has a slight different understanding. He says no, the Prophet ﷺ had the towel brought to him. What does that mean? He says that proves that that proves that wiping yourself with the towel is the sunnah. How does that work? The Prophet ﷺ said no. How can we say it's a sunnah when he said no, I don't want it? Which means it was a regular habit. How can suddenly she decide, you know what, today I want to give him a towel? No, the fact that she brought him the towel means that it was a regular thing. She always brought him a towel, it was a habit. But this time he decided and said no. Yeah? For there are two ways of understanding this. Either we say this was a regular thing, but on this occasion he didn't want it, which means it's still a sunnah, but just in this case he didn't want the towel. Or we say no, he rejected the towel, which shows that it's better to reject it as well. Similarly, it's better to reject. And we could say possibly before he would use a towel, and then after that he never used the towel. Or we say there's no proof that she regularly bought it. Maybe it was a one-off. And nothing here states that it was a regular thing. But Shaykh al-Uthaymeen says it's an indicator. It indicates that it's a regular thing. Yeah. So anyways, this is all talking about what's better. Nothing necessarily is a clear-cut sunnah. Nothing necessarily sunnah mu'akkada. And definitely nothing's wajib. If a person wants to wipe themselves with a towel, there's no problem. If a person doesn't want to, it's up to them again. Okay. Now with the houses in the cold weather, the wiser option is to dry yourself with the towel. Okay, because you come out of the shower in the house, you're going to walk out with the water dripping down in the bedroom and into the living room, and water's dripping and dripping. It doesn't work. If it was back then, it was outside. Back then the ghusl might be outside. So by the time they got to the house, they're already dry because it's hot. Now by the time you go inside, you're wetter. And so again, like we said, in our scenario, using the towel would be better. Would be the istihsan. Anyways, we'll end it there, inshallah. Unless we have an option of continuing 4 ahadith and we complete the chapter of ghusl. Yes? Okay. وعن أم سلمة رضي الله عنها قالت قلت يا رسول الله إني امرأة أشد شعر رأسي أفأنقضه لغسل الجنابة وفي رواية للحيضة. So Salama رضي الله عنها says, O Messenger of Allah, I'm a woman with tightly plaited hair on my head. Okay. Should I undo it for taking a bath from sexual intercourse? Or, in another narration, taking a bath from menstruation? So the Prophet ﷺ said, فقال لا إنما يكفيك أن تحثي على رأسك 3 حثيات. He said no, not necessarily. It's enough for you to throw 3 handfuls of water on your head. So a woman who has her hair plaited, okay, these things that they do, she can wash her hair like that. Okay, she washes her hair like that without necessarily it being wajib for her to undo her hair and let it return it back to its natural state. Even if it's like that, plaited, she can still have ghusl and wash her hair. But it's mustahab, it's recommended to undo the hair. Why? Because it's better for washing, and it gets there. It gets every part of the body. And in the other narration, the Prophet ﷺ, we'll come on to it later. There is a janaba underneath every hair. Okay, there's a sexual impurity under every hair, which we'll come on to this hadith later. which means that the better is to undo the hair and then wash it properly. But that's sunnah, it's mustahab, it's not necessarily wajib. If she wants to keep her hair like that, no problem, but she just washes it completely. وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إني لا أحل المسجد لحائض ولا جنب صححه ابن خزيمة. I do not permit a menstruating woman or anyone in a state of sexual impurity to enter the masjid. And this is the opinion of the 4 imams. So the menstruating woman or the junub, the one in a major state of sexual impurity, cannot enter the masjid. Cannot enter the masjid. They can pass through the masjid, but they can't enter it. Pass through means walk through, straight through. But they can't enter and sit in it. They can't enter and sit inside the masjid. Because of this hadith, it's a clear hadith. And in fact we have a verse of the Quran. وَلَا جُنُبًا إِلَّا عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ. No junub, okay, except passing through. Okay, except passing through. And so we have a Quran and we have a Sunnah for this proof, to prove this ruling here. According to Ahmad ibn Hanbal, if a person makes wudu, a person is junub. A person is in a major state of impurity and wants to sit in the masjid, but had no chance to make ghusl. They can stay in the masjid with wudu. They can make wudu and stay in the masjid. Why? Will wudu have an effect on them? Will it affect their ghusl? Will it affect their impurity? It won't affect it, but it lightens it. How do we know it lightens it? Because the Prophet ﷺ commanded, before you go to sleep, make wudu. Doesn't mean you can pray with that, no, but he said make wudu. That's what he said to Umar. And we saw the hadith in Sahih Muslim. If one of you wants to repeat entering their wife again, he said make wudu. Which means that wudu reduces the weight or the heaviness of the janaba, the major state of impurity. So according to Ahmad, a person can sit in the masjid with wudu. Most scholars say no, even with wudu. Why does Ahmad say you can do that? Because he says the companions radiallahu used to do it. And that's narrated from some of the companions. They would sit in the masjid in janaba, but they would make wudu and then sit in. As for the woman, menstruating woman, she can't sit in it at all. Not with wudu or with anything. Okay. And this is important to understand. A person might use that as an excuse and say, okay, what if a woman wants to attend a lecture, or she wants to listen to a class, and she wants to do this, therefore, how can we prevent her from the masjid? It's not us who prevented it, the Prophet prevented. And so reasoning, trying to reason in the face of authentic texts doesn't work. If you want to reason when there are no authentic texts, maybe. Okay, but if you want to reason against authentic texts, we can't do that, sorry. Okay, because the Prophet is the one who commanded that. Who commanded you to sit inside the masjid and listen to a lecture? It's recommended, it's a rewardable deed. Okay, the same person who recommended sitting inside the masjid to listen to a lecture is the same person who prohibited the menstruating woman from sitting inside the masjid. So if you're listening to him here, listen to him here. Yeah? And this is important to understand. And that's why a person, when a person accepts Islam as a whole religion, that's a sign of their truthfulness. Some people will accept the religion here, but not there. When you talk to them about this, they say, yes, hadith and sunnah, and Allah commanded this, and this is it. But when it's something else, no. Why? The person who commanded you to pray, the person who spoke about this hadith, the one who said this hadith is the one who said this hadith. Why are we accepting this and not accepting that? This is important to understand. Wherever the Sharia is, then it's to be followed, regardless of what the command is. وعنها, i.e. Aisha again رضي الله عنها, this is the penultimate hadith. قالت كنت أغتسل أنا ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من إناء واحد تختلف أيدينا فيه من الجنابة. متفق عليه. Narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. I used to take a ghusl alongside the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, and our hands would alternate in scooping water from it. So scoop water from it. All that shows is that having a ghusl with one's wife is allowed, and there's no harm in it. Okay. And in fact, we could even argue it's recommended. It's a better thing. because it brings the husband and wife closer. It's recommended. A person can intend it to be a sunnah and can intend it to be a good treatment to the wife. Yeah? And the wife is the same with the husband. Final hadith. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن تحت كل شعرة جنابة فاغسلوا الشعرة وانقوا البشر أو وانقوا البشرة رواه أبو داود والترمذي وضعفاه. Okay, narrated by Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, and they considered it da'if, weak. There is a sexual impurity under every hair, so wash the hair and clean the skin. Okay, so they say it's a weak hadith. However, once again, we said washing the hair is wajib, and cleaning the skin again, basic meaning is wajib as well. Okay, and now with that we reach the book of Tayammum. After Tayammum, we have the chapter of menstruation, and after that it's the book of Salah. So 2 more chapters and we enter into the book of Salah, and we'll end it there inshallah. Usually we would have something on the comprehensive book, but I think today we'll cut it there, and with the comprehensive book we'll start it next week inshallah, because it's a lot of information I think we've taken. الله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله.